That's consensus,
No action.
Jeff. No
Okay.
action is needed.
No action is needed. Thank you,
I
Commissioners.
guess the other part of that brought this back to this one was looking at the facilities in general and where our space needs are going to be. So with this leaving the agendas in the future, I'm not sure we're going to have another opportunity to bring that back up for a while. So I think it's really important that as a group and in public we talk about our space needs and move forward with that. And we haven't accomplished it at all. Like I said, we talked about, I mentioned forming a subcommittee, kind of kicked that around. It was talk about having just a work session as a full group. That's not gaining any traction. So I guess I'm to the point where I think we do need to form a subcommittee, move forward with it on that line. So I guess my recommendation would be to form the subcommittee of posts 1, 2, 3, and 4, and solicit the help of Miss Jane over there as our county clerk to help us as far as the staff needs.
I have a little bit of concern.
Okay.
The subcommittee of posts 1, 2, 3, and 4. You don't think the chair needs to be involved in that?
I think the chair will be absolutely involved in that.
Well, then I think we have a subcommittee of 5.
Well, I guess the problem is I keep getting, every time we approach the subject, I'm running into a brick wall about it. So if we move it to the subcommittee, and actually you're an end user of the facility, and will definitely be participating in just like the rest of the people who are daily users of the facility.
I think we've had, the board has seen probably the results of the study that was done in when was it, Jeff? 06 was done as far as space needs. It was projected out. For how many years was that, Jeff?
It was a 20-year look ahead by Mr. Bramlett.
Yeah. So we have that kind of information. What we do not have is some numbers on and we've attempted to get some of those numbers as far as appraisals and things of this nature on various pieces of property that the board needs to review. And then getting some guidance and direction on where we go from there. I think those are things that we need to address again as a group, probably in the executive session, and looking at some of the more specifics as it relates to that is what I think would be more appropriate.
And I have to disagree to a point, because I think at this point, the board, and I'll be off the board soon, but this board needs to decide where they want to go before they even look at property, before they look at buying anything, having anything appraised. You know, I mean, simple things. What do we own? What do we have? How much space is in that building? How many staff are in that building? How many staff are in this building? And I agree. I think a retreat is needed before you even look at purchasing land around the courthouse, outside of the courthouse space, and see where you're going. I mean, we're going to get to the point where the courts are going to come to this board in the future and say, y'all need to go, and we're going to make this public. You need to move. This is what we need. Y'all need to get out. And you're going to be sitting there. Then you're going to jump. You're going to buy land you don't really need, don't know what you're going to do with it, and pay for land that might be overinflated. So, I think before you start doing appraisals on land and looking at buying something, the board needs to sit down together in a retreat meeting. Could be here, could be anywhere. And really, I think staff can give you what we own, how big it is, how many people are in it, and information that this board needs to discuss as to where they want to go forward before you start spending money to purchase land or look at land. and that's just my feelings as a commissioner, feelings as a citizen. You know, I think the direction this board, that's the way it needs to go. And I'll be happy when I leave office in December to come back and sit, join a committee, do whatever you need me to do as a citizen to help y'all make cost-effective moves that will move us forward. Because I think a study done in 2006 is not valid now.
Well, I think, and I can't disagree with the validity, but I think the projections that they had at that time was, as you said, Jeff, a 20-year projection as far as that's concerned. So again,
times dramatically changed since then.
I understand that. That's what I said. It may not be completely valid, but I think it is a projection of what was done. And the fact, too, that we have gone through a downturn in the economy. We are recovering from that. We are taking a look at, those, whatever recovery is needed as far as staffing is concerned, and all of that. We'll attempt to try to set up some type of session where we can meet to get into more of a discussion period, where we can look at aspect of the review of that study, perhaps, Jeff, bringing that out, and then taking a look at the space, what we have, what's being occupied, that kind of thing can be done with a special session that would be just devoted to that. Okay.
If I could speak to that just a moment. I agree. I've agreed for a long time, a very long time, that we need to start deciding what we're going to do. It's closer than most of the public knows, and that's my concern. If we form a subcommittee and go behind closed doors to do these discussions, I'm not in favor of it. I understand the reason for executive session when you start to talk about specific pieces of property that you might purchase. There's certainly a valid reason to do those. But to talk about in general terms where we are, where we're going, and what we need in square footage, I think needs to be held in a public, open to the public session, so that we can start to get some feedback from citizens on what they would like to see us do. We're going to be around here, just not, our Republic going to be around less than most of us, but we're one group of commissioners. We don't need to try to make the decision for an ever long time without involving a lot of citizens. I very much favor either meeting, doesn't have to be called a subcommittee. It's going to be 5 people, we might as well call it a work session. And start.
That's what you normally call, right?
Start to look at numbers in the public, so that people that write the newspapers might start to write some. This board recognizes that there's going to be a need to find some more space very soon, or at least real soon. So I'd like to see us do it in work sessions and meet in public until we get down to the specific pieces of property that we might want to buy to fulfill that need, and then we can take it in the executive session.
Let me clarify if I can, that the subcommittee would not be discussing specific land. That was never intended to be any kind of other meeting in the grand jury room. Bringing in each department that's affected, from clerk of court to board commissioners. Even if we're looking at facilities, we need to even talk about what's happening down at animal control, utility department, what their needs are going to be, and that bringing them in at that point, we're looking. After the information's gathered, we got some idea of, okay, this is what we project, or think our maximum employee count will be.
5 years, 10 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Then the subcommittee can bring in the consultant, and they can go in detail, okay, with that employee count to achieve the goals that each department is bringing to you, and the ones that the commission wants to then you start figuring out your square footage and what your footprint's gonna be. And then it goes back up here to finding that piece of property to make that work. And I guess the reason I'm saying subcommittee is because what we're saying right now is what we've been saying for several years since I've been up here. It's just getting to the point where we've got to act. I don't see any other way to do it
It's been,
other than forming that.
you're right, it's been discussed many times. And,
So I guess
so why don't we set up the, take a look at a date on the work session and to pull it in, perhaps at that time, a review of what we have and by departments, constitutional officers, or whatever.
And Commissioners, I know Commissioner Hale has indicated the property we own. I think what has to also be considered is Dalvin property that's currently being used. And whether or not the board wants to continue leasing that
I mean,
building.
unleased, whatever
Right.
we have.
Whatever we're using and operating out of. Yes.
And I would really like, I mean, I agree, call it what you want, but I think, you know, you're right, we've been talking about it a long time, so can we set a deadline of let's, at least this board sit down in an open meeting, work session, whatever you want to call it, before December 15th? Can we put a deadline on when this board will at least get together and go from there? And then you can,
I think trying to get together between, sometime between now and that time would be a good potential. If we can find a date to
And I'll remind the board, our general standing meeting in December is the 16th. So we're talking about probably adding a work session prior to the 16th.
Okay.
I mean, at least have a deadline so we know we're going to sit down in public and talk.
But then after that's done, see, typically what happens is you do the first thing, you meet that deadline, and then it goes on the back burner for another 6 months
Wow.
until something comes up or.
I would hope from that meeting that we could form a committee at that meeting.
I think every time we leave one of those meetings, we need to schedule another meeting.
Yeah. Or at least, form a committee.
So that,
I'll make some decisions.
I'll make a decision.
That's helpful.
Well, first thing we need to do is, let's get it on the calendar. By next meeting, I think we as commissioners ought to be challenged to come up with a date, and let's make it happen, so we can tell the public by next meeting when we're gonna make this happen. Because that's what we're not doing. We're not coming up with a date to make it happen. And I've been walking around and pushing people in the halls for talking about it for 2 years myself, but
That's why I
we gotta
set a
and move
date
forward.
that we would
We've
have
gotta
to
set a
meet.
date.
In advance, if you all send that date, I'll start assembling information.
Try to set something
I'll start working with staff on that
And
now.
of course, I know I work and that causes a problem for y'all, so, but if we can do it for December 16th, that'd be great.
Yes, ma'am.
Make it happen, Joe.
Yes, ma'am.
My
The
final
other-
order to you before I
I
leave.
want you to know that the other two work. This guy just retired.
I know John Park. These two are retired.
Retired.
Not
I hadn't
yet.
think